Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you for coming today. We're going to be discussing strategic communication skills for YPAs. This was developed by Maggie Benjamin, my co-presenter, as well as myself. So we're going to do some introductions. My name is Megan Simpson, she, her. A little bit about me. I have an associate's degree in human services and social science. I graduate with my bachelor's degree this Sunday in interdisciplinary social science, as well as a minor in African American studies. Really excited about that. I have a lot of different professional experience. I've joined different career paths, tried out new things. Some of this includes working in youth residential settings, providing group therapy. I was a supervisor of a program. So I have a little bit of a diverse background. And lastly, I'll share I am the co-founder and development director of Now She Speaks. And Maggie is the founder and CEO. And with that, I will pass it on to her.
Good afternoon, everybody. Again, like Megan said, thank you guys so much for coming. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about, and I'm really excited to speak to you all who work with youth and who hold peer advocate roles. I'll tell a little bit about myself, and then maybe we can get into some introductions of you all. My educational background is quite diverse and a little bit all over the place, but some of the major and key points are that I have an associate's degree in human services, a bachelor's degree in communications, and I am near completed in my master's degree in trauma and crisis counseling. I also have various certificates, including a lot of trauma-informed stuff, human services certificates, and things like that. As for my professional experience, I've spent a lot of my career over the past 6 or so years working in domestic violence and recently getting into human trafficking over the past about year or so, where I've done a lot of advocacy. I've worked in shelters and safe houses serving youth and adults. I've done hospital response for sexual assault victims and also did advocacy for them as well. Another population that I've worked with heavily is the homeless population and those who experience food deprivation. I have a severe commitment to our community here in Buffalo, New York, and the local Western New York community, and have done a lot of volunteering and things like that. So peer advocacy is something that I hold very close to my heart. I'm a survivor of domestic violence, so that's why I got so deep into that work and was able to serve people the way that I was from understanding from an inside perspective. So I really value that aspect of your guys' role. As it stands, I am the CEO and founder of Now She Speaks, which we serve human trafficking and domestic violence victims and professionals who serve victims in those fields. Formerly, I was the coordinator of survivor support services at the International Institute of Buffalo, operating their human trafficking and domestic violence team until it closed about a month ago tomorrow. The department shut down. So focusing on Now She Speaks and really trying to get out into the community and talk to different people to try to spread some of what I have to offer and learn from you all, what you guys all have to share as well. My interest in talking to you guys directly is that I really think that effective and strategic communication influences reliable, supportive, and effective connections in those that we support and those who are in need of support. So that's about it that I have to say about me. I would love to talk about you guys a little bit and see if each one of you would be willing to introduce yourselves. Oh, by the way, I go by she, her, hers pronouns. So feel free if you could introduce yourselves. Let me know a little bit about you guys.
You can come off mute, or if you're not comfortable with that, you can share in the chat.
Well, I don't want to take up the time here, but I'm TJ Curtis. I'm with Families Together. I am a family training coordinator. I have a bachelor's in business. I am in school for marriage and family therapy for my graduate. I've been a youth advocate from the beginning, one of the first in New York State, and one of the first founding members of Youth Move National. I've been in the foster care. I was adopted at 16. I have a background running the streets and stuff like that. So that's what got me into advocacy and trying to get back to my community. I have a passion in trying to help men uh, to get them involved more with family services and um, they've been lacking. Usually, when you think about services and families, is mom and children, and I'm a big advocate to get men back involved. And my passions are martial arts. I'm a father. I'm an advocate, and thank you for having me today. Oh, he and him. Uh, TJ is fine.
Thanks, TJ. Would anyone like to come off mute and share next?
My name is Alex, he, him. I'm a YPA at SCO.
Thanks, thank you. I do see in the chat someone named Paige introduced herself by she, her. She's a youth peer advocate with Youth Acts through Northern Rivers. Thank you, Paige.
Hi, everyone. Oh, my bad. No, go
That's
ahead, Maury.
okay.
Oh, okay. He, him. My name is Maury. I'm a peer advocate, peer mentor with Berkshire's Power Project. Took the job. I was part of the program, graduated from the program, and then I was given a position here. Doing my best to help the youth.
Awesome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Robbie Lettieri. I work at the New York State Office of Mental Health, and I am pronouns he, him. Very happy to see you all. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Rob.
Maggie, nice to see your face. I've heard your name a bunch. Megan has sung your praises in the past, so nice to meet you.
That is so
Alex,
sweet. It's a pleasure to meet you too.
Alex, it's great to see your face too, and all of the new staff at Families Together. Congrats and hello.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're going to move forward. So our agenda today, we're going to talk about how language is ambiguous and why it's ambiguous in different cultural settings, as well as just in our own culture and how we can misinterpret things. We're going to be talking about communication principles and approaches. We're going to be talking about some principles that you might not be familiar with. We're going to talk about how we can use language and communication strategies to coach and mentor the youth we're working with. And we're also going to discuss how we can build these healthy communication skills in the youth. All right, so just a quick review of the YPA principles and our roles. I want us to be keeping these in mind as we're going throughout this presentation and learning, because when we finish this presentation, we're going to circle back around to these principles and roles and identify how we can use what we learned today in these roles. So just keep this in the back of your head. As YPAs, we do a lot of advocacy, efficacy, and empowerment. We do bridging between the youth and the providers. We want to encourage these supportive relationships. We're building those connections. We want to support the youth building connections with other individuals. And we're also promoting healing and recovery and different strategies in different ways. All right, and I'll pass it over to Maggie.
Thank you, Megan. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, just making sure. All right, so I want to talk about language. And I think when we all think of language, we all think of something different because we come from incredibly diverse backgrounds and we all have different makeups that cause us to look through lenses that are very specified to our experiences. So when I mention language, I like to go over a few of the definitions that currently stand. There are about 135 definitions of language, and we'll end with the most recent updated version, which kind of clarifies it a bit more and gives some context to what we're going to get into moving forward. So the first one at the top corner The principal method of human communication consists of words used in a structured and conventional way and conveyed by speech, writing, or gesture. So I think when we think of language, we definitely can conceptualize that it's speech, writing, gesture, regardless of our cultural background or our personal experiences and things like that. But that doesn't mean that it looks the same for all of us. And it's important to note that how other people view language can impact how they receive the information you're trying to share with them, or, for example, advice you may be wanting to give them. So it's important to have a shared concept of what communication will look like between you and each of the individuals that you guys serve. And I won't read through each one of these, but I want to touch on the more important ones. A system of communication used by a particular country or community. I think that's incredibly important because we're talking that language is diverse. Language is across the US, across the world, but in each individualized community, that can look different. And this definition actually specifies that, where a lot of the other definitions don't specify that it's used by a particular community or country and that it has shared meaning. So just moving into the most recent definition of the 135, the words, their pronunciation, and the methods of combining them used and understood by a community. So this kind of really captures the fact that in order for language to be successful, there has to be shared meaning, there has to be shared understanding, and there has to be some foundation built for understanding so that you and the peer or the youth that you serve are able to understand where each other are coming from and are able to decipher when there are differences or barriers in each of your guys' form of language so that you can still succeed in assisting that youth. The last thing I'd like to mention while moving into ambiguity, it's really important to note that everything just explained really points to ambiguity, which is essentially the quality of being open to more than one interpretation. So language and communication of any type is incredibly ambiguous. And if there is not a concept of shared meaning and shared understanding, it can be incredibly difficult to have a successful connection with someone that you're attempting to support, especially if you're conveying something that they may interpret in a different way than what you mean it. So it's important to note that due to this ambiguity, that you really have to be very clear and very concise in your ways and in your speaking, and also always be willing to answer clarifying questions and open the door for clarifying questions to be asked, because sometimes people feel like, if you're saying something that seems very simple, they might say, well, I don't want to feel a certain way if I ask a question I should know the answer to. So we want to always open the door up for that question to be asked, open the door up for them to know we welcome you to ask us, we welcome you to clarify, we welcome you to understand and want to do whatever we can to make sure that that's the case. So we can try our best to close the gap on the ambiguity of language between you and the particular youth that you might be serving at the time. So what are some of the things that you guys think influence the ambiguity of language or that you have experienced in your personal lives that might have impacted clear communication due to the ambiguity of language? Feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat, whatever works best for you guys. Megan mentioned in the chat the different social norms per different cultures, even subcultures in the same city. Absolutely. Even when I think about like the makeup of Buffalo, right? We're very divided by South Side, East Side, West Side, North Side. And each side of Buffalo has a very different population makeup. in communication between someone in South Buffalo and someone in even just East Buffalo, there could be some major breakdowns in communication. So environment makes a big difference, the subcultures, and the different social norms. Absolutely. Thank you, Megan. Any other things that you think might influence ambiguity of language? Paige says the way people were raised and taught. Absolutely, 100%. The things that we are taught as we are raised, we kind of, I like to use this analogy, right? Think of our brain like we have a bunch of compartments in here, or a filing cabinet rather, and we put information in this filing cabinet and we push that drawer closed. But then when something comes up, it's like our brain automatically recollects what's in that filing cabinet, opens up the drawer and uses the information automatically without looking through an objective lens, and a lens that reflects your current experiences. You're just going back into that filing cabinet and pulling out the information you know, the information you have quick access to. And that's a lot like the things we're taught when we're raised. Sometimes, even if we don't want to be away or act away, it's so deeply embedded in our filing cabinets in the back of our brain that we can just automatically pull it out and it just happens without second thought. So really sometimes having to challenge those things you were taught while you were raised, and also identifying which ones are healthy things to move on with, and which ones you may need to do, different work to change your communication method. TJ?
Sorry, I wanted to add on to that real quick is, the way people were raised and taught. When we're working with youth, we might be working with a youth who has, one, an aggressive communication style, two, more of a passive communication style, or maybe no communication style whatsoever. They're not engaging with you at all, which is a form of communication. So we want to take that under consideration. Is this youth that we're working with, if they're not communicating in an effective and healthy manner, they were either taught ineffective communication skills, or they didn't have someone role modeling healthy, effective communication skills. So TJ made an excellent point about ethnic background. I'm going to let Maggie speak on that.
Yes. So kind of going in ethnic background, there's a lot of things around language related to ethnicity, and our racial makeups and the constructs around race in the community that influence our communication, and how we communicate, and what we're willing to share with others, right? And for me personally, and I'll just share a little piece about myself just to give a perspective from my lens. I identify as an African American female. I grew up around mostly African American individuals. Regardless of the fact that my mom is white, I have had some distance from that side of the family. So surrounded around mostly African American people, the constructs around language and what is acceptable or unacceptable is very different than in a lot of other cultural communities. And working at the Institute, I really had the pleasure of working with people from such diverse backgrounds and got to see like how the things that are norm to me are completely abstract to other individuals. And one of the things that I think comes to mind specifically, and I actually was just having a conversation with Megan about this, is in the Black community, we have a common tendency to do this thing that's called like ribbing on each other. And it's like, cracking jokes, and it might be in the form of rap or music or just making funny jokes with each other. And in our community, it's a concept of love. But when you think about the bottom line of it, you're essentially talking negatively about people that you are supposed to represent love to. And outside of our community, that's not something that's well received, and it's not understood. And it's not something that if someone sees such an interaction where two African American individuals are laughing and joking while also talking badly about each other, or doing what might be referred to in this community as ribbing, they might feel as if this is something that is completely unacceptable, it's disrespectful, and they may not understand how the underlying concept of it is actually still love. And that's one of the things that really comes to mind with ambiguity of language and communication. And I think with all of the other different cultures, there are very specific and particular things that influence the way they communicate as well. So always just trying to be as mindful as possible that what we have experienced may not be what the person we're interacting with has experienced. And it's nice to learn as much as you can about them so that you can understand their perspectives when they're communicating, especially as it relates to their ethnic makeup and their environment surrounding that. Does that make sense? I know that was a bit long of an explanation.
I thank you, Maggie, for that thorough explanation. I think it is important to consider all of these different aspects and these different subcultures and how that influences language. So
Right.
here we have language, and I know this is a little bit of a complicated map, but I'm going to direct us through it. So we have language. Our culture influences our language, and the language we use is part of our culture. Now, culture is going to influence the social norms we have, and we talked a little bit about that even when it comes to subcultures within the same city. Those social norms are going to create stereotypes. They're going to create word associations. Do you have a specific feeling, such as fear, when you associate that to a certain word? There's also going to be symbolism. The symbols you use might be different to different cultures. It might mean something different. A stop sign is universal, but there's different indicators of if you should slow down, if you actually have to stop, if you can keep going, and you just have to be conscientious about what's going on in the environment. So that can be different based on different cultures. And that's just an example. So all of these things make up our culture. And then we have how our culture influences the language. How we speak, the language we use with others is the language we use when we're thinking. Now, if you grew up with you grew up speaking a different language than what was popular in the neighborhood around you, then you're going to be thinking in two different language styles. Let's say someone who is bilingual in Spanish, they grew up in their family speaking Spanish, but then they learned English. They might automatically think in Spanish, that's the language that they're using, but because they've also learned English, that's going to start mixing in with their thought processes. So the language we use influences the cognition style or the way we're thinking, and that influences automatic thoughts. Some of us have heard of automatic negative thoughts. We immediately have anxiety once one minor negative thing happens, and that causes us a lot of distress when it might not have been a situation that needed that level of anxiety. So we have these automatic thoughts. These automatic thoughts can be how we identify ourselves, others, or objects. It can also influence how we categorize an event. Do we perceive this event as traumatic, or would someone else perceive it as traumatic even though we don't? And then we also have it influences our emotional and behavioral responses. So when we're working with youth, we want to think about how is their cognition style, the way that they're processing information, how they're having automatic negative thoughts, and how that's influencing their behavioral responses. And we can also take under consideration how trauma can influence the language we use as well as the style of thinking we have. And that's based on the knowledge we have related to the trauma and how we self-identify. Any questions related to this map? Okay. All right.
Maybe just give an extra second just in case anyone's typing for the chat. I love that chart. Thank you, Megan. Okay. How does your culture influence your language in the way that you communicate? And I really want you guys to think about while answering this, your family makeups, your friend dynamics, your social groups, communities that surround you guys, the environments that influence you. Really dig as deep as you can to try to give a really reflective answer for this question. And I'll just repeat one more time. How does your culture influence your language and the way you communicate?
So I can say for me, my stepmother, she came into my life when I was very, very young. She always spoke very grammatically correct, specific sentence structure, using certain vocabulary words and almost a very proper sense of speaking, um, because that was what was taught to her. So then growing up, I had that influence of language in structuring. However, when I was in elementary school, I didn't learn English grammar like everyone else was due to some of my different learning disabilities. So that also influenced my communication in the language I use. So although I want to incorporate all of this proper sentence structure, the proper grammar, and these big vocabulary words, not having the education on English grammar in my early elementary schooling has caused a mix on how I communicate. So I'm using big words, but my grammar is completely off. And that's just something that's unique to me.
Thank you, Megan. I appreciate you sharing that.
As a person who's multiracial and been adopted, I've been influenced by a number of cultures. So in that, I learned to wear different masks, and like you stated, kind of this was pertaining to the audience. So my work vocabulary would be of, I guess, white, because some of my youth back in the day said, "Oh, you sound white." Well, I'm at work, so I'm not going to speak Ebonics, or I'm not going to speak Patois, or I'm not going to speak Spanglish, right? So, or even Pidgin for that matter. So just it's contingent on where I am and who my audience is and what I'm trying to do. And then I did throw in, colonialism had a huge part because it took away language and morphed language like patois. It's like a mixture of Spanish, English, and Nigerian or Ifa dialect, if you will, from Jamaica, because that was one of the islands that had a Spanish influence, whereas you have Trinidad and let's say Guyana, where even though Guyana has Spanish around it, it wasn't influenced as hardly as much as let's say Jamaica. So it for me, like it just depends. So with my cousins, it would be more Spanglish on one side, and then my others would be more Patois. With my family, my wife is Spanish, so I try and work more on that. But when I'm with my adopted mom, it's proper English, and she's a psychologist. She's a doctor. She comes from academia background, so that's important. So it really just depends on my audience.
I really appreciate that feedback and that insight. And I think it brings up a very important point that we have the ability to morph into all of these different roles as we see fit and as it's fit for the duties that we're carrying out in them, right? So we communicate very differently when we're hanging out with our friends than how I'm talking to you all right now and we're having this training. Um, and our communication changes per our situation all the time, and being aware of that is incredible. And being able to fine tune your ability to communicate in different environments is a really special attribute in youth peer advocacy and peer advocacy across the board. So thank you very much. Paige mentioned in the comments, or in the chat rather, my mom is from Ireland, so she came to the US with not a lot of grammar knowledge, but my dad came from a very strict Italian family with always speaking proper grammar. So I was taught my dad's ways. Yeah, that's awesome. It's nice to have someone who's able to give you that grammatical background, but it's also nice to have that rich cultural aspect from both sides of your family as well that all influence your communication. Would anyone else like to share? So Megan posed an additional question in the comment, or in the chat rather, sorry. I'm used to monitoring our Now She Speaks social media, so my brain just goes to comments. I apologize. How do you how do you make people more comfortable while communicating with them? And they have a different set of experiences or cultural makeup or background than you do.
And this is really considering when we're working with youth. Do we know the slang terms that they're using? Because I am not up to date on modern youth slang terms. I'm not, and that can be a communication and a language barrier. Are you using really structured language, or are you much more relaxed and flexible in language when we're working with youth? So we don't necessarily need some examples from you guys, but keep this in mind, as we're going through this information, as we're thinking about how we apply this to working with you. Did anyone else want to add anything before we move on?
Well, kind of piggyback into what you said, I think it's important for YPAs to understand the demographics that they're working in. And like, yes, you might not speak Ebonics or whatever, but to understand to keep up with the slang. Well, I'm always surrounded by kids, so I get to be privy in that. But also with the music, I understand what's going on and what's out there. I really do think it's important understanding your demographics and the youth you're working with. Just pay attention and ask questions. That's the most important way that you're going to learn. Um, and develop that comfortability with that youth, as opposed to you're just coming and speaking proper and they're coming and speaking to you how they want to. It's going to make it look like to them that you're not taking them seriously or you think you're better than them. So when I was a youth advocate, it was meet them where they are. You might want to infuse a little bit of proper etiquette, just so they can develop their own vocabulary without even thinking that that's what you're doing. But that's how I would do it to kind of answer your question. But it's important.
I completely agree with you. And I think it's important to make sure you can identify with some of the things that the youth that you serve enjoy, the things that they like, the things that they're surrounded by. I worked in foster care for quite some time, and I too also was in the foster care system as a youth. And when I worked in foster care, I really got the opportunity to see how important it was to know who you were serving. It was my particular role to match children with parents, and I would train and educate the foster parents as they came into our, system of parents willing to foster. And in that process, I really got the opportunity to see how important it is to know who you're serving, because if I hadn't, I would have potentially made some really bad placements, and it may have been a disservice to them. So knowing who you're serving and knowing what they like, what they're into, what type of things they're surrounded by really truly does help you serve them better. Absolutely. All right, we can go ahead and move on if you'd like, Megan.
All right, so communication principles and approaches. In our last TA call on inclusive language, we talked about person-centered, strength-based. We're not going to be going over those again. We're going to be kind of exploring some other ones. So the clarity, tone, and choice of words we use are really crucial in effective verbal communication. The tone we use can indicate a different feeling behind it. So if I'm speaking really upbeat and I'm happy and you hear it in my voice, that's going to really indicate that my mood and what I'm saying is joking. But if I'm really mellow, very monotone, it sounds almost depressed in my voice, and I'm really not engaged, you're going to be able to pick up on a mood because of the tone. And then we have clarity. Clarity is how you're saying something. Are you speaking clearly? Can they understand you? Are you slurring your words at all? Is that making it difficult to understand? And then the choice of words that we use, and that's where we're coming to the vocabulary. I'm not necessarily going to use these really big vocabulary words with the youth because one, they might not know what it means, or two, that might be too, they're not comfortable with that language style. It's not going to help, it's not going to be balanced communication for them. And we're always trying to meet that youth where they're at. Maggie, did you want to add anything else onto this?
No, I think that was a really good wrap up. I think it's just important to not express negative emotion and not make the youth feel like what they're expressing to you is too heavy. And if you experience a situation where they're expressing something that is too heavy, to seek, healthy outlets outside of directly dealing with the youth, but always try to be as helpful and as supportive as you're able to. Sometimes, like if a youth is expressing something to us and we express negative reaction, it can give them internalized emotions and things like that. So I just think it's important to be mindful of how we react to information received and to make sure that we seek the appropriate support if we're not able to maintain our composure and reaction while dealing with difficult situations. So, what are some examples of nonverbal communication that you all are familiar with? And if you can, maybe just the emotion that you might associate to them as well.
Crossing your arms. Just using body language is your nonverbal.
Absolutely. What emotion do you feel might be conveyed if someone is talking to you with their arms crossed?
See, that's where I won't lie, I'm a bit conflicted. So for me, I cross my arms when I'm talking to people, but for me, it's a comfortable thing. It has nothing to do with me being closed off, but society or speech intellects would probably, or communication intellectuals would probably tell you that means they're closed off. They don't want nothing to do with you, A, B, and C. Um, Once again, it could be a cultural thing, but I guess for community's sake, it would mean the person is closed off and they are uncomfortable. But for me, it's a comfortable thing. It's me holding myself, So it's contingent once again on the audience and who it is.
I really like that you explored that. So when you experience things like this with the youth that you're serving, and maybe you feel like they're gesturing in a way that might make you think they're closed off or uncomfortable, it's okay to ask, like, when you fold your arms, is that a sign of something that I should be aware of? Is there something I can do to ease you? Or is that something you do for comfort? It's okay to ask these questions if you've established rapport and built up that bond with them where you can have that open communication. Because what the social norm is not an exact expression of what it is, right? It's not definite. It's just suggestive based on majority, right? But there are some people who are going to absolutely defy that and not mean what it is societally acceptable to mean, right? So it's okay to have those communications if you have questions or if you're worried that someone's communicating non-verbally, something that you might need to address verbally. It's okay to ask questions to elicit more information from them if you've established that platform. Anybody else? Paige commented and said that she agrees with TJ. Sometimes it can be seen as comfortability, or I even do it sometimes if I'm cold, but others can view it as if you don't have any interest or care. Absolutely. And I think like also too societally, a lot of self-comfort concepts are coming more to light where that might not be viewed only as I'm closed off and it might be something more acceptable, in another way. But I also hold myself in that way for comfort, or if I feel anxious or something, I do that as well. So I completely agree.
I want to identify something that is unique to a specific culture. Now, I can't remember what culture this is. However, I do know that in some cultures, if you shake or eat with your left hand, that is rude and it's considered almost an insult if you're using your left hand to engage with someone else, because that's the hand that is considered dirty because you wipe yourself with that hand. So if you shake someone with that hand, that's considered an insult. So you're supposed to eat and shake hands and, provide a physical comfort with the opposite hand. And said I can't remember what culture that is, but I do remember that's a very specific cultural aspect of communication.
Hindu
Yeah.
culture is big on that
Hindu
because
culture.
the whole one hand is for eating, one hand's for wiping. Hindu culture is very big on that. So
Got it. Thank you. I knew I remembered it. Just couldn't remember which one. Yeah. Would anyone else like to share before we move on?
All right, so just to go a little bit more into verbal and nonverbals, and we'll move across the slide here. So verbal is any written, spoken, or signed language, and it is made up of many different aspects that contribute to how effective it is. So when we talk about paralinguistics, Megan went a little bit into some of these, but I really want to go deeper into some things like speed. For example, talking too quickly might make a youth feel as if you're rushing to get the conversation over, as if you don't have true intent or true care about what they're experiencing, or if they're speaking in a slow speed and you're constantly saying things that are urging them to get it out quicker or things that are rushing them to more quickly express. This can convey an underlying message that there isn't true care for their situation. So always making sure that you're maintaining an appropriate speed while you're conveying information and that you allow other people to convey information at the speed that's comfortable for them, and kind of meet them where they're at and understanding where they're coming from. Accents are something that can really throw us off in communication. In New York, we don't think we have an accent here, but if we go anywhere else, they think we have an accent. So I'm certain we have an accent, right? So our accent in comparison to someone's accent from, say, maybe India, but they speak English, or someone from an African country, but they speak English, there's going to be different undertones that impact our language because of the dialects that we're used to using and things like that. So when you're dealing with a youth that may have an accent, or if you have an accent that impacts your ability to communicate, just being mindful of that, especially if it is the youth, and not making them feel uncomfortable about it or making them feel as if their accent makes them less capable of communicating. Also understanding that it's important to be patient. Everybody has different backgrounds, different makeups, and their language has been deeply embedded in them for majority of their lives or sometimes just portions of their lives. But no matter what, it goes automatically through that cognition style, and it can't always be changed overnight or sometimes at all. So just being patient. Megan mentioned in the comments that her accent can really confuse people, even in her own city, because her accent doesn't match her city's general accent, which is true. She's often gets questioned about it and if she's from somewhere else or what words might have been said. And it's important to create a space where you can comfortably ask for clarification and that the youth can do the same if you have an accent that might impact your communication. Moving over to nonverbal characteristics, facial expressions is really important. It's important to convey concern, but it's equally as important not to convey negative expression. And it's important to note that you can relay negative information, such as, let's say, a youth is at risk of something. It's okay to discuss what the youth is at risk of, but if the youth is telling you that they're experiencing something and that they're at risk and your face automatically contorts in a way that expresses an emotion they may not be comfortable with, it might cause them to close down or shut themselves off. They can interpret that facial expression in a way that it was not intended. And if there's not a platform for communication around that, it can really change the dynamic of how you move forward with that youth. So just being mindful and also creating a space where they can communicate with you about that and ask questions whenever they feel compelled to do so. Posture is important. There's not a lot of examples around this that I'd like to go over. But if you have your legs wide open with your arms thrown between your legs and you're slouching like this, it kind of shows that you might not care too much. And while that may not always be the case, it's a widely received interpretation, and it can be conceptualized as a lack of interest, or that you don't want to be involved in such conversation. So just being mindful of your posture. Posture conveys positivity. I always tell my kids that. And it truly does. So just being mindful. Proximity is really important. Proximity can be described as the space around an individual for this context. Some people are very comfortable being close in proximity, and maybe even being shoulder to shoulder while having a conversation, while other people might feel more comfortable being across the room or not in a closed door space, or depending on their traumatic experiences and their environmental makeups and all of the things that make them who they are, they may be severely impacted by proximity and their proximal space being respected. So it's very important to have conversations with the youth about this and make sure you understand what their proximal space limitations are and if they have boundaries around them, around their proximity. Another thing to note is that in many different cultures, their culture calls for proximal space requirements based on their commitment to their culture. So some, like for example, the first one that comes to mind in Muslim communities, um, some Muslim communities, women are likely not present around men without their husbands or their brothers or someone who's male and familially connected to them. So if you're a male peer advocate and you have a Muslim female, she may not be comfortable being in a closed door kind of space, and it's nothing to do with you um, or your offense to her or anything like that. Just simply that it's not normalized for her to be in such a space with a man in a closed door kind of environment. And there's many other examples from all different cultures that call for different things that make people more comfortable. So proximity is really important to be mindful of and important to have a conversation about when you're getting to know your youth and you guys have established enough rapport to talk about some of these more difficult things. Actions. Okay, those were the last things I wanted to mention. Oh, odors. Let's go over odors as well. When dealing with people from extremely diverse backgrounds, there are a lot of different odors that might exude from their skins, from their clothes, from their hair. They may use products that may not be normalized here in the United States or that may not be normalized in your particular subculture that is in theirs. One thing that really comes to mind when I think about this, and I experienced it while working in foster care, there are some Indian cultures that use turmeric skin treatments and things like that. And it causes a severe change or yellow tone to the skin. But also, they smell like turmeric very commonly on a regular basis because turmeric has a lot of healing qualities and there's a lot about it that works really great with our skin, but it also produces a smell. And for some people, that might be something that one may be uncomfortable with. But if you're experiencing something like this while working with a youth, it's important not to make them feel like their odor prevents you from providing them with effective service. And if it's simply a matter of poor hygiene, figuring out what barriers they have that are preventing them from maintaining their hygiene and really getting deep into that conversation of how you can help them and how you can redirect them to feel inspired to care for themselves better. But if it is a cultural thing specifically, it's very, very important to not be judgmental and to be open-minded and mindful that everybody has different practices, everybody uses different things in their hygiene care, and some cultures don't use soap or hygiene products at all. So it's very important just to be mindful that odors are not always a matter of something that might be easily manageable. It might be something that could be deeply embedded in their culture and their communities and in their environments.
Thank you so much, Maggie, for talking about odors. That's something that we frequently forget when it comes to nonverbal communication. And when we're working with youth, it's also important to remember that and keep that in mind because how we have a facial expression in regards to a youth approaching us who might have a different odor than what we're accustomed to, that can make a big difference because they don't see or know your thoughts. All they see is that they approached you and you looked uncomfortable, and they're going to internalize that. So it was really important to identify. Thank you.
Absolutely, not a problem. So moving into the three principles of effective communication, the first being establish intent. So when you're working with the youth and you guys are just getting started, just introducing to each other, or just really getting into doing work together for their betterment, it's important that they know what your purpose is and what purpose you have in investing in them. So in establishing the intent from the beginning is important. And this might look like, here's an example, letting a youth know you're committed to this work because of your experience, or you're committed to this work because of a lack of service providers that actually care, or whatever it is that's your personal why. Always establish that with the youth that you're working with, and establish what their why is for wanting to do better and feel better and be able to achieve more of their goals. Um, Getting that down from the very beginning really creates a clear foundation for how genuine you are, how much you're willing to help, and what your purpose is there, and how much they can trust and rely on you from the very beginning. And also opening up the door for them to tell you what their intent is, what are their goals, what are they looking to work towards, what is the purpose for you all's connection, and how can it be most fruitful from the very beginning. And then you begin to build rapport and you get to know each other better and you share things with one another, of course, appropriate for workplace environment. And you really figure out what it is that you can use to connect with that youth, whether it's one thing or many things. It could be a community, it could be an object, it could be a shared interest. It could be anything. You can build rapport around anything if you really hone in on the interest of your youth and you figure out where you guys can connect and create relatability. Always being genuine with them, building trust with them, being a reliable resource with them, and always performing your duties to the best capability that you're able to at that time really generates rapport, and being there to support them time and time and time again, just in your regular role and responsibility can build that rapport, but really going above and beyond to get to know who you're serving and how you can best help them, and how they can best help you grow and in your professional role and continue to develop as well. And always define the outcomes. Figure out what the end goal is for you as the professional and what the end goal is for the youth as the person seeking services or in need of help. And it's important when defining outcomes that we are not being very surface level, like for a youth, for example, maybe they're having trouble maintaining their school attendance. We don't want to just say maintain school attendance as a final outcome. No, we want to discuss the barriers that are preventing them from getting towards their final outcome. We want to connect them to resources and refer them to linkages that can help them break down those barriers that get them to that final outcome. So really just trying to go way below the surface and figure out what's at the root cause of this outcome and how can we build up from there to make it strong and have a good foundation when it all unfolds. Okay. Denotative language is just language that refers to explicit meaning or literal meaning of the word. It's straightforward, objective definition of a word. It avoids the emotional or subjective association. In your work as a youth peer advocate, it's important to know when to use denotative language because if we don't express compassion or emotion of any kind, then we're going to have a difficult time building rapport and allowing or creating a space where the youth can trust and open up. And connotative language is exactly the opposite. which is on the next slide. Sorry, one second. Connotative language is exactly the opposite. It has meaning, often influenced by culture, emotional, or subjective associations rather than explicit dictionary definition. And truly, one or the other is not best. It's about knowing what to use and when, and figuring out if denotative language that is clear, concise, cut and dry to the point is most effective for what you're dealing with the youth at that time, or if a more culturally or emotionally inclined language or response is required. Next, we're going to move on to the 4 communication styles, which Megan will go over with you guys.
Okay, so one communication style in the chat, let's just fire them off. We know that there's 4. I know that some of you know what these are. Wow, no one wants to identify the 4 types. I know we all know these. So we have passive aggressive, we have assertive, and then we have aggressive. So these are the 4 communication styles that we are traditionally taught growing up, or that we are traditionally exposed to and we develop an understanding of. But there's a lot more to these 4 communication styles than we have been taught or that we usually consider. So we want to consider verbal statements, the thought process, the nonverbal movements or actions that are associated with that communication style and what emotions are behind why we use that communication style. So if we check out this chart here, it really goes over how that communication style is impacting actions, looks, and appearances, the beliefs that someone has, the emotions that they might be feeling, and the goals. So I want us to really take a look at beliefs and goals. When someone is communicating in a passive way, and we can think about a youth who might be nervous, they might have the belief that their needs are not as important as others. That's why they have to appease. They have to please the other person. They have to accomplish what the other person wants. So they're kind of self-sacrificing in that sense. And when someone is communicating in a passive way, their goal is to avoid conflict. They do not want to create more conflict. They do not want to cause tension. They're hoping to alleviate any conflict or tension that is occurring by communicating in that passive way. When we have someone communicating in an aggressive way, let's take a youth who has been triggered and is very, very angry at the person who triggered them, but we don't know that they were triggered. This youth might start to feel that their needs are more important and justified because of that trigger, whether they've recognized it or not. And that can lead to behaviors that are explosive with anger because they're under the impression that my anger is justified, my anger is a need that needs to be met. And that can be considered. But then the goal is when someone is communicating in an aggressive way, that they want to win. They want to win whatever challenge is occurring, whatever conflict there might be. Their goal is to win in their perspective. And what winning looks like is going to be different depending on the individual and the youth. So when we have someone who's communicating in that passive aggressive way, we really think of that as like the quiet meanness, because they're still being mean, they're still communicating in a harmful way, saying things that might be upsetting, but they're doing it in more of a subtle way. So that's why it's almost like sneaky aggression. So their beliefs is similar to aggressive, where it is my needs come first. But here's the thing, they're not expressing it outwardly in such an open manner. So they're trying to figure out how to express this and maintain these beliefs without potentially creating this major conflict. So they feel like they are entitled to get their own way, even if they made different commitments. So then we have the goals, and they want to get their way without taking the responsibility. They want to get their way without asserting themselves, because they might have some challenges when it comes to effectively asserting themselves. So this might be a youth who is giving their providers or their guardians a lot of attitude, but not outwardly saying what's upsetting them and not engaging in any like explosive aggressive behavior, but they have those insults. They have the tone in their voice. There's clearly something that's upsetting them. And lastly, we have assertive. And this is the communication style that we want to build up in youth, is so they can effectively communicate with their providers, they can effectively communicate with their peers, building that connection. We really want to coach and mentor this. And this is where they develop an understanding that their needs are just as important as someone else's needs, which can be difficult when we're in our adolescence to think that, other people's needs are also on equal level of importance as our own. And we want to consider that we can both make valuable contributions and responsible for our individual behaviors. The goal of assertive communication is to, one, express yourself in a respectful and healthy manner. We want to find an agreement. We're coming to a compromise. And then we want to identify what are the boundaries that need to be enforced so that way we can maintain mutual respect. So when we're looking at this chart, and I encourage you to look at this chart after this when the slides come out and are available for everyone, because this is how the communication styles are going to manifest in the youth you're working with. So if you can identify an action that they're doing combined with an emotion that they're expressing, you might be able to make that connection and identify what beliefs they might be having. What is their goal right now based on how they're expressing themselves via actions? Any questions before we move forward? So how do we show youth that we are actively listening? I would love to see some responses in the chat. If you want to come off mute, I'd love to hear it.
I guess your best way would be to, active listening would be asking the questions and make sure you heard what they're stating to get that clarity. And they can either articulate or go in depth, or they'll verify that you're listening is right on and the conversation will flow.
Absolutely. Thank you, TJ. Paige put in the chat, responding to what the conversation is about. Absolutely. Keeping it on topic. And then Alex said nodding. Absolutely. That's that nonverbal communication. We're being attentive. We're paying attention. And nodding is a common form of showing that we're actively listening in many different cultures. However, Maggie, are you aware of any cultures where nodding might communicate something else?
I am not specifically aware, but that is something I'll look into and learn more about.
And something to consider. All right, thank you for your responses, everyone. So a lot of us are very familiar with different active listening strategies. It is something that we provide education on during the YPA 4-day training. So I'm just going to briefly touch on some of these. We want to, when we're active listening, we want to pay close attention to what the speaker is saying with their body language, because how they say something might, or what they say might contradict their body language. For example, if I have a youth that is really upset, they just finished crying, they're starting to calm down, they're sitting there kind of closed in on themselves, talking really quietly, they might start to say, yeah, I'm okay right now. I don't want to talk anymore. I don't need you here. But it's clear that they're still really upset. It looks like they might be on the verge of crying. That might be an opportunity where you can offer, hey, I still want to hear you if you want to talk. If you don't want to talk, we could just sit here in silence. It's up to you what you're comfortable with. Because even though that youth is saying verbally they're okay, their body language is not saying that they're okay. So we want to give feedback to see if we clearly understood the message. And that is the rephrasing, summarizing. Then we can compliment the speaker. This is a great way to encourage and build healthy communication styles in youth as we compliment them. We can say something like, it sounds like you put a lot of thought into what you just shared. It sounds like you have been developing this for a while, or it sounds like you're very self-aware about how you feel about this. We're complementing the thought process. We're also complementing how they communicated it. So then when we're actively listening, we also want to be checking ourselves on our personal biases and how that can affect how we interpret what we're hearing. And this can go all the way back to how language is ambiguous and how culture influences language. So if someone or a youth is sharing something that you automatically have a negative association to, that might be a personal bias. So make sure you're checking that, be aware of that. So then we have poor listening. I'm going to briefly touch on this. You're looking around the room, you're not actively engaged in your body language, you're giving unsolicited advice. They don't want to hear the advice. Right now, they just need someone to listen, and they don't want to have solutions yet. They just need to express it. And that's something we have to consider with the youth we're working with, is that they don't want a quick fix. Sometimes they just want to be heard. That's what they need because they don't feel like other people are listening to them. So something that we might do in our personal life without realizing it is when someone is telling us a story, we might have another story that can relate, but it might be bigger than theirs. It's on the same topic, but it's bigger. This might be where people feel like that the attention is being taken off of them, where they are dealing with an issue, but when someone else brings up their issues, they feel like they're not being properly supported. So some people interpret it that way. Others people interpret it as being able to relate and building that connection. So you can consider how that is being received by the person you're engaging with.
Would you mind giving an example for that?
Yeah, so let's say, okay, we're just going to go straight to two youth. We have two youth. One of them has engaged in self-harm. The other one has also engaged in self-harm, but they also had a suicide attempt. So the one youth who only engaged in self-harm might be saying, yeah, I have these scars here and I use this type of item, which is something that youth will do amongst each other who experience the same things. The other youth who has attempted will say, well, I did this and this and this, and I used this tool, and it caused me to have to go here, and that was how I attempted. And that is kind of topping the other person's experiences. I went through that, but my experience is worse than yours. So that might be something that we can do in minor ways without realizing it, or it can be a major thing. And some youth who are bonding with each other over their shared negative experiences or behaviors can start to get this topping. I got to top my other person. My story is more traumatic than their story. And that's something that we want to check and be conscientious of.
Just to add a little bit to that too. Sometimes I think when people are expressing things they're experiencing, it's very natural for us to want to relate to them. And sometimes they're not looking for relatability. Sometimes they're looking for someone who can completely surround support around them. So I think there's a fine line between that and just trying to determine in each situation where that line is and what is best for that moment.
Any questions before we move forward? Okay. So coaching and mentorship concepts. This is where we're really going to take these communication concepts and apply them to how we're coaching and mentoring youth and working with them. So how do we communicate with youth when we are coaching and mentoring them? What language do we use? How do we structure our sentences? Can I get maybe 2 examples? You can either say it out loud or put it in the chat. Maybe an example of what you said to a youth when you were trying to coach or mentor them. You might be struggling with this one a little bit, which is okay. We're going to move forward and we're going to explore this a little bit more in depth. So When it comes to empowerment-based language, this is where we're really building up that individual's self-esteem, their confidence, their security within themselves, their sense of self-worth. Empowerment-based support is an approach that prioritizes empowering individuals to make their own decisions, regain control over their lives, and build reliance and resiliency. So we really want to empower youth and give them the autonomy. We're giving the power back to them. That's something that we keep wanting to do. There's 6 points to empowerment language, and that is autonomy and choice, giving that back to the youth. We provide information and education. That's part of what we do as YPAs. We are also collaborative with the youth. We're collaborative with the providers. We make sure that there is a collaborative decision-making on the support that the youth is receiving. We're always advocating, we're always trying to provide support in different ways. There's also healing and recovery. Empowerment-based language is promoting healing and recovery from whatever someone is experiencing, however they might experience that. Empowerment language is also long-term empowerment. We are consistently using this language. We are staying consistent. We are staying accurate. We're maintaining the same ways that we express this. So that way the youth interprets this as a familiarity, ongoing process. Empowerment language is really going to build these resiliency skills in youth. It's going to build up their confidence. It's going to help fight their sense of low self-worth, which is what a lot of youth who might be experiencing mental health challenges might be working from. So then we have the 7 C's model of mentoring, and I'm going to pass it over to Maggie.
Sorry, I forgot to press unmute. So this is one of the last things that I wanted to talk about, or one of the things I wanted to talk about in this section. The 7 C's model of mentoring has really been designed or developed to facilitate the best and most effective mentoring relationship. It was not created specifically for the field of human services, but is a very generalized concept, and it works well for you guys as well as for me in my field of work. So starting with the purpose, goals, and actions. This goes back to the model we mentioned earlier, really laying out what the intent is from the very beginning, figuring out exactly what the outcome is of your guys's relationship and your professional role in their life as a youth, and figuring out what actions need to be taken to obtain those goals. This can be done by facilitating conversations and building relationship. So this diagram kind of moves outward. So when you're having conversations, you want to be clear, you want to be concise, you want to always express your purpose and the intent that you have in engaging in that conversation. Always be genuine when you're building rapport, and offer to the youth the same thing you would want offered to you while building a healthy relationship. And that can also encourage them to do so as well. So moving out to step 1, anytime you're working towards a shared goal with a youth or in any other area of life, the most important thing to start with is commencing. This is to enter upon, to begin, to start the proceedings of, or to have a beginning, right? A start point. You get together and you agree to do this. Then you're connecting continuously, working together adamantly over and over again, time and time, from different angles with different areas of focus, all towards the same shared goal. And then moving forward, providing clarification. Always provide clarification, even if it seems repetitive or redundant, or you've had to provide clarification multiple times. Reiterate it in new and fresh ways, sometimes presenting information in more than one way gives people the opportunity to understand it through the lens of their interpretation better. So always provide clarifying information, present information in various ways to make sure that they understand, and ask confirming questions when you're clarifying. Centering means to always keep the main goal in mind, always focus on what that shared goal is, what is the outcome, always bringing everything back to that. So if the youth is experiencing a behavior and they're having a difficult time seeing the end goal, you can bring them back using some of the things that they've worked on. You can recenter them based on that goal, giving them tools to refocus. Then moving into collaboration or collaborating. This is something that you'll be doing each step of the way while you're working with the youth, but how effective you are at collaborating with the youth can impact how the outcomes turn out, right? So the more collaboration you have with the youth, the more you could inspire them to collaborate with you. And it's really important to always model what you're looking to teach them, because the more that you model it to them, the more likely they are to have an example of this in their life. Um, we don't know exactly their family makeup or what they've been exposed to or who they've been around. We only know what we have the capability of representing to them, and we can continually represent that we're looking to collaborate with them to work towards their goal and helping them achieve it and becoming self-sufficient in achieving these goals. Moving on to challenging, number 6. It's incredibly important to always challenge ourselves as professionals and to always challenge the person that we are working with, and in this case, the youth. So everything shouldn't just be easygoing, sailing right through. Sometimes some things are going to come up and sometimes they're going to be difficult to get through. And sometimes you directly, as the youth peer advocate, are going to have to challenge the youth in ways that may create discomfort, but it's okay to create that challenge if you've already built rapport and connected with them and you continually clarify and you're continually bringing back the shared goal and you're collaborating with them. All of those steps makes it easier. I'm not going to say it makes it much easier, but it does make it easier to be able to challenge them in areas where they feel incapable, encourage them and empower them using that empowerment-based language. Make sure that they know that you believe in them while you're challenging them, and continue to support them through the challenge. Moving through to completing. So when you get to a stage of completion, this is where we think that the client has, or I'm sorry, in my case, I often work with people we refer to as clients, but in your guys' case, the youth. This is where the youth will be at a place where they have reached one of their goals or all of their goals, however you guys have made a plan, and where they feel they're at a place or maybe empowered enough to create a new set of goals and begin taking more initiative and being more assertive in this process. And the more times this process is repeated as you continually work with them, the better and more efficient they will become at being able to do these things with less support as time goes along.
Do we have any questions on mentorship and coaching and empowerment language before we move forward? I know this was something that we were struggling to identify some examples of, so I want to make sure that we have a little bit more of an understanding. Okay, so we can experience many different types of challenges when I'm sorry, youth can experience many different types of challenges when they're trying to communicate and express themselves, particularly youth who didn't have someone teaching them or role modeling effective and healthy communication skills. So some common challenges we might experience is a youth who doesn't want to engage or communicate at all. They're comfortable sitting in silence. Might be a youth who naturally expresses themselves very loud, very excitable, very energetic. And that can be overwhelming for others. It could also be a youth that's expressing themselves through aggression and anger, even if they're just trying to get their point across. It's presented in such an angry way, and that can be a challenge, and they might be struggling with that. So there's some examples of coaching strategies that we can do when it comes to teaching youth healthy relationship, healthy communication skills. First is we are role modeling, constantly role modeling that effective and healthy communication with them, in front of them, to the parents, with the providers, with everyone. We're always role modeling that, because if they see us engaging in unhealthy communication skills, they are going to copy that, or they are going to justify using unhealthy communication skills. Role play can be really effective for some youth. It doesn't work for other youth. So after you've built rapport, take that under consideration. We always want to praise healthy communication skills, even when it's not one of our goals, even if it's not something that we're working on. We still want to bring attention to that, because we are continuously building that skill in the youth. And that praising the healthy communication skills is actively working on their connections. We're supporting healthy relationships through providing guidance on healthy communication. Self-reflection, we always want to encourage that. That's how we're going to help these youth grow independently. And then we also want to emphasize the importance of healthy communication in order for them to reach their personal goals. If they want to reach that goal of going to college to own their own business, we got to encourage them to learn these healthy communication skills, because they have to communicate with professionals, with business partners, with banks, all that, in order to have their business. So we can use that goal as a reason to encourage the healthy communication. And that brings us back to our YPA roles and principles. So after we've learned all of this information today about communication strategies, approaches, coaching, and mentorship, I would really like to hear from the majority of us how we're going to apply this information in our work with youth, referencing some of these principles and roles. So if you want to put it in the chat, I love that. If you want to say it out loud, that's great. This is our last conversation, so we're going to be wrapping up right after this. So I'd love to hear what we learned today.
Sorry, I forgot to.
Any thoughts?
I like these principles and roles. I think I like how clear it is, and it's adaptable to any community.
Absolutely. Thank you, TJ. Paige put in the chat that she learned more about cultures, and that sometimes a body odor could be something that is coming from a tradition. Yeah, I'm happy that you learned that today. It's something new. Hamlin put in, this was great. I think it will really help with the self-reflection portion of working with youth and being able to constantly improve how we communicate with each other. Absolutely. And Cameron, you're working on a self-advocacy toolkit. Some of this information could be really relevant to teaching youth how to assert themselves and advocate for themselves. So let's revisit this later. Can I get some other people to share what they learned today, or how they're going to apply this information to their work with youth? We are going to move forward. Is there any questions that we have before I give us our last announcements before we end our training today? Any questions related to anything we learned? Any confusion? Thank you, Robbie. Okay. All right, guys. So that was our TA call for today. Thank you for joining us. We have our topic determined for next month. I'm going to be providing a training. It's going to be more interactive. on exploring healing and recovery journeys, because every single one of us and every single youth we're working with is going to have a different style of healing, is going to have a different style of recovery. They're going to identify different, and we're going to explore all of the different ways that we can support a youth's unique healing and recovery journey. I am going to put the link to that in the chat. You guys already joined, so you might already be signed up, but maybe you didn't sign up for all of them. Next, we have the youth peer meetings. This is a great opportunity for us to get together and network. This might be something that we are able to build skills in, find community. We're collaborating with other people. Can really be a great environment to join. And then we have the supervisors lunch cafe. If your supervisors are interested, this is for supervisors of YPAs to build their skills and also be supportive. And then Maggie put this in the chat, but she sent it directly to me, so I'm going to copy and paste it.
Sorry, that was silly. I didn't realize.
Maggie said, feel free to reach out with any communication related strategies and assistance. She knows she is a resource for adult and youth victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. So if that ever comes up in your work, we definitely want to provide any guidance or support.